I was trying to shoot a video, but I've been taken over. Guys, you gotta give me some room. Well, hello, brothers and sisters in the bar. Professor Jeremiah here. You can kind of barely make out Dash's head and my last. Can you say hello, Dash? You don't want to say hello. Scout, come here. Come here. And Scout's just out of the picture. Let me pull you up here a little bit better. Well, it's been a busy day. I just got back from church a little bit ago, and it started out quite adventurous this morning. Pastoring a little church out in the country, and you never really know what you're going to run into. And this morning on my way to church, actually I got an early start this morning leaving the house, and I was going to arrive about 15 minutes earlier, and that was cut just a little short with a rather lengthy conversation at the gas station. And then on the road to church, I happened to see a horse that was loose out of its pasture. And so, having owned a number of horses in the past, and I wished I had them now, but having owned a number of horses in the past, I know how it's nice if you have somebody that knows what they're doing to help wrangle up your horses. So I pulled my Jeep off to the side of the road, and I helped the guy round up his horse that was loose. Let me get this lit here. I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right. This is a new acquisition. It's a Mastro Beraldi pipe. It came from the brewery in Birmingham, Alabama. And look at that. It's a great shape. Really nice. This is maybe about my 6th or 7th smoke on it. Smoking some Cades Cove Cavendish. Or at least I rather should confess, this is my version of Cades Cove. I had ordered some a while back, and it's not that the store up there was inadequate in filling my order, but it was back when Gatlinburg, Tennessee had the fires, and I maybe ordered a little too soon. I guess I ordered a week or so after the fire. And I did so at that time thinking that due to the fires they would have lost some business. And so I know you would say, certainly by now, yeah, but I was ordering a lot. And so when it didn't come in, I went to my tobacconist and just figured that they had been rather busy after the fires. I knew their store wasn't affected. But anyway, we came down to a mixture of chocolate and a Yorkshire. And so I think it's like 66% chocolate and the remainder was Yorkshire, which I'm not sure. Yorkshire may be relabeled at their store. Anyway though, let me get this lit again. So once the man got his horse this morning, it didn't take long. Might have been like somewhere between 5 and 10 minutes. In the end, I arrived at church at the time that I normally do. But once he got the horse didn't want to go with him. And so he grabbed the lead and walked the horse in a circle a couple of times and was able to then kind of get him into submission or just break his rebellion streak, and the horse went on with him. And that reminded me of a horse that I bought in Belize. The first horse which I bought in Belize was actually my coworker's. And when we bought that horse, and it was a great price, $250. That seemed to be the going price of most horses in Belize at the time that we were there. And so the first one which we bought, she was pretty nice looking, had a pale face. So sometimes if you've had a pale faced horse, that they'll have skin problems on their head, but that was no problem. I mean, we could put lotion up there and stuff. But we bought her with the saddle owner, and I learned after that. Maybe some of you out there, if you know horses, I learned to never buy a horse with the saddle on it. And she looked fine, but once the saddle was removed, you could tell that she had a good bit of a sway back. Not too terribly bad, but it was a sway back. Meaning basically that somebody had tried riding her when she was very young, and oftentimes the case in Belize, and just put a sway in her back. Well, the second horse, I had gone and looked at it, made arrangements to purchase the horse. And this is Belize, Central America, and the only other vehicle which I had was a 1975 Ford school bus, which I had gutted and turned into an RV. And I drove that bus from Birmingham, Alabama, all the way to Belize. That was my home. For the 7 years that I lived in Belize, I lived in the school bus. This lighter's not cooperating. About saying the end of its days. And I scared the pipe into smoking anyway. But anyway, so the bus though was really just to live in, and so it was parked. And up to that time, I had taken public transportation, which sometimes just was not very, very convenient. One, they would leave the village. We were in a Mayan Indian village for those 7 years. They would leave the village early, like 3:30 or 4 o'clock in the morning. And they would arrive into town before shops opened. And then they would leave town at 12 noon. So you really only had from about 9 o'clock to 12 to do all of your shopping. And then if you forgot something, you had to wait for the whole week. Now, the village which I lived in, the city was a little over 30 miles, maybe about 32 miles from the village. So obviously I wasn't going to be riding this horse back and forth from the village to town. But anyway, when I went to go pick up the horse, I got on the public transportation, had my saddle with me, and they dropped me off at a junction which is about 15 miles from my house in the village, or I say my house, from the school bus in the village. And then with the saddle in tow, I had about another 4 miles walk to the people which had the horse. And at this point, I was really hoping that the horse was going to be there, because I was just cold planning on buying the horse and riding it all the way back to the village. So it was going to be about a 19-mile journey back to the village where I was living. And so I got there, the horse was there, the owners were there, we exchanged money. I had the horse, I put the bit in its mouth that didn't really want to take the bit. I put the saddle on its back, and he really puffed out his gut, didn't want the saddle, and had to really work with him for a little while. I think I rode him for a few miles and then had to cinch the saddle down a little more. But it was where I could go about 5 miles and he would just stop. And it was like, I'm not going any further. And I would have to do the same thing, where first I could sit on and pull the reins and, turn him around in circles until he just gave up and was like, okay, we can go. And I did this with him, I guess about 3 times or so. But the final time, we had just topped this hill, right right at the edge of the village. I mean, we were probably a half mile from the village at this point. And I had walked some of this trip because I knew the horse wasn't used to having somebody on his back that long of a haul. So I'd walked probably about a total of 6 or 7 miles in this journey just with him in tow. Well, right as we're just outside of the village, he decides he's not going any further. He's done. That's it. And try as much as I might, I just couldn't get him to make that final step into the village. And after a little while, it just seemed like there was just something like a almost invisible barrier that he was just shocked. Like, I don't want to go any further. And I got back on him. I remember I'd gotten off and thinking, maybe he just really give out. And I'd given him water and stuff, a little feed, which I'd brought along the way. So, and I'm fairly familiar with horses at that point. So I really just didn't want to give up. So anyway, I got back on top, kept turning him in circles, and finally, after a couple of good kicks to the gut, he went on. That evening, one of the men of the village came, and he told me, he said, I saw you having some trouble with your horse today. And I said, yeah. And he said, that was up by the ruins. And there was some ruins just outside of the village. This is in an area, if you've ever seen the Crystal Skull, which was found in Belize. Actually, the village which I purchased the horse from was the very village where the Crystal Skull was supposedly found. And my village, there was a small ruin just outside of it. And archaeologists had come to that village about 10 years or so before us, and the villagers ran them off. And the villagers even went in with a machete and destroyed several of the stelae, several of the carvings which was in that area. But this man began telling me that the reason why I was having trouble was because there was a jaguar that was up at the ruins that afternoon. And that they'd had to shoot the jaguar later that day because he was coming in and getting some of their chickens and destroying some of their farms. So I just wondered if the horse maybe smelled this jaguar, and for that reason didn't want to go any further, didn't want to go into the village. After I found out who had shot the jaguar, I don't remember what they had done with the skin, but I'd asked them if I could have one of the teeth of the jaguar. And at this time, the man only had one tooth left. A lot of the villagers, if they killed a jaguar, they'd make a necklace out of it. So he gave me one of the teeth. And I put it up. I don't think I was going to make a necklace. I had some intention at the time. But to the life of me, I put it up. I remember exactly where I put it. It was in the corner of a drawer. And I was the only person that ever went in that drawer. And it was just like it disappeared. And I'm not trying to turn it into some mystical thing, but it did. The tooth just disappeared. Later, we ended up having a horse and buggy, or not the horse part, but we had a buggy made by some Mennonites in the area, and that is what we used to go back and forth from our village to town in. So typically every Friday, we would hitch up the horses and the buggy, and we would leave the house between 5 and 6 in the morning, travel 15 miles, and at the same junction where the bus had dropped me, there was some other missionary friends who lived there, and they let us keep horses in a pasture at their house. So we would trade out horses at their house, and then there was a little more than 15 more miles on into the city. Not a big city, really a town. About 2,500 people that were there. Sure, it's grown a bit by now. But anyway, we would tie the horses on the back street, do all of our shopping. I guess normally when we first would get there, we'd tie the horse on the back street, give them some water. We would go and eat breakfast. I always saved enough money for that part to eat breakfast, and then we'd go to an internet cafe and check our email, and we would check our bank account here in the States to see if we had any money come in. If we hadn't had any money, then we let the horses rest for a little while, and then we'd go back, give them some horse feed, and head back to the village. And if we had money, then we would do the shopping that we needed, go give the horses some water, some feed, leave them when we went and ate lunch, visit with a few people in town, and then we'd head back to the missionary's house that was halfway, trade out horses again, and then head back home to the village. The village which I was in, my coworker and I, we did a few different works there, but one of the main things that we did is we had a high school for the young boys of the village. Mayan Indian village, right on the edge of the jungle. And in those 7 years that we were there were a lot of adventures to be had. This would have been from 1999 to 2007. There was one cave in particular which some of the young men of the village took Jeff and I to. And when we first went into this cave, there was a lot of pottery shards in the opening of it, and you could tell that they had a lot of age to them. It wasn't anything new. The people of our village at this time didn't even make pottery anymore. There was another village which is on the whole other side of the district which we lived in, and they made pottery, but I never really noticed it in our village. So this was clearly ancient pottery. As we looked around the inside of the cave, though, a part of it shot off going even deeper. And I used to do a lot of spelunking here in the States growing up, all through, I first started in middle school, my 8th grade year, and then all through high school and after. So we asked the young men with us, we said, have you been down this path on the cave? And they said, no, we've never been down there. I said, well, did the elders of the village forbid you from going down this passage of the cave? No, we're not forbidden to. I said, well, what do you think's down there? Oh, I don't know. They were real afraid to go past this main entrance. And just kind of the explorer, adventurer in me, I had to know. I had to know what was down there. And so we started venturing on deeper into the cave. And the interesting thing was, after we made it past that first little chamber which we were in, I never saw another piece of pottery. I never saw any signs that man had even been deeper into that cave. There was stalactite, or not really stalactite, soda straws. If you know, if you've ever been in a cave, they're the thinner, I guess, thinner stalactites, stalagmites. We had to break some of these soda straws to clear passage for us to go deeper. And we went probably 400 to 500 yards deeper into that cave. And the deeper we went, the more uncomfortable these young men who were with us became. One of them did get a little excited in a good sense, but for the most part, there was just no desire for adventure. It just didn't seem to really be there. Wish it had been. Sometimes I think maybe for coming from kind of a Western culture, Western civilization, Europeans especially, we have this hunger for adventure, this hunger for the unknown, to want to know what's beyond. You know, what's on the top of the mountain. I remember in Nigeria asking one of my Nigerian friends, I said, we were in this very, very deep bush area, and he was telling me, he's like, this is the area where I grew up. And I asked him, I said, have you ever been to the top of that mountain? And it was a huge mountain just out of the middle of nowhere. And he said, no. He said, but one white man came through when I was a child, and he went up to the top of that mountain. And I found it just mind-boggling that, you know, it was the white man who went to the top of the mountain. He had grown up in that village his whole life and never went up there because he didn't care what was up there. He told me as much. He's like, nah, our people, they don't care about what's up there. I would like to have known what the white man found on the top of the mountain. In Belize, I tell you, at the top of every mountain, you will find some form of Mayan ruins. Recently, there was a discovery in Guatemala of a large Mayan city. I think you may have seen where they've been doing this new mapping system. And they continue finding out that the cities were much larger and had a greater infrastructure than what was believed. And they're acting like this is all new information. It's only the mapping system that's new. I've been at archaeological sites in Belize with an archaeologist that was, this would have been probably 2004, and the archaeologist was just ecstatic with saying that he felt like the city that he was excavating was going to end up being one of the largest cities ever found in Belize. And I, at the time, in my mind, was thinking, I don't know about you, but every place that I've been, I find ruins that I couldn't dig in my backyard in Belize without turning up rocks that were clearly the remains of some ancient culture. I can share that now because I don't live there. So now I'm not worried about somebody coming in and claiming that my house is some uh, national historical site. Well, I know this has been a little long. I uh, just had returned from church, and I always end up rambling and talking. My coworker's not around today, so his ear wasn't available to hear whatever direction I was going to go off on. The time that I was in Belize, we ended up with a total of 7 horses. And when you're really working horses, when you're using horses for a living, not just for pleasure, they're not just standing out in your pasture. Uh, a couple of things is one, you find out that one spare tire isn't necessarily enough. And so, with the horses, if one started going lame, if he just didn't feel like working, you needed another horse. Uh, the other thing was, what was the other thing? Well, I forgot my other point. It just came through my mind and left. But well, I may not think of it anymore. But anyway, you definitely always need a backup spare horse. Oh, and I know what I was going to say was that the other part is that you know horses love to be worked. When I would go a few days without hitching one of the horses to the buggy, when I would start leading them to the buggy to hitch them up, they would get excited. They were ready to work. And if I hitched them to the buggy a little bit before our journey was to commence, that they were just raring to go. And really, I mean, you hear that expression, but they really were. They were just excited. They were ready to go. And with the exception of one of the horses which I had, I really never had a horse that wasn't ready to pull the buggy. I can tell you, one of my horses, she would just pull the buggy until she dropped dead if I'd let her. Wasn't that she was afraid to have it behind her. She just loved to go, and she would just work and work and work and get all worked up into a lather. For literally, it's just like soap suds almost coming off the horse. But she loved it, and I really tried to be careful with her because she was my best horse, and my best team were 2 horses called Wycliffe and Wheeler. And until the day she died, we had a dog that was a mix between a Chow Lab mix. Had gotten her here in the U.S., took her to Belize, had her while I was in Belize, and the whole time she would ride with us when we would take the buggy out. And she would sit right up in the front, just looking right in between the 2 horses and watch every bit of the road. And she would hardly ever lay down. She would every now and then she would lay down in the buggy, but most of the time she was right there looking out and watching everything that would pass. But when we had to leave Belize in 2007, I brought her back here to the U.S. and then took her to Nigeria, where she was in Nigeria with us till she passed away. But to the day she died, up to that time, I could say, Wycliffe, Wheeler. And she'd pick her head up and she was ready to go. She thought that the dogs were still around. Or horses, that the horses were still around. Well, brothers and sisters, I never really had got this pipe lit well enough. I should have lit it before I started talking. I know this video is a little too long and maybe I won't have very many viewers for it. But I thought I would just talk for a while today. Watched a number of videos yesterday, really getting caught up with a lot of people in the community. And just really enjoyed it. I enjoyed those which I watched. Well, brothers and sisters, hope you have a good weekend, that the rest of it's well, and that Monday being a holiday, hopefully many of you will still be at home, at least a holiday here in the States. It's President's Day, which for most people what that means is furniture stores put up their specials out. I don't know, maybe I should go buy some furniture tomorrow. Anyway, brothers and sisters, hope you have a blessed weekend.